In 1455, a court in Mainz took the printing press away from the man who built it. He had borrowed the money to make it, and he could not pay it back. So his investor took the workshop, the type, the presses, and the Bibles that were still sitting on them, and went into business without him. Johannes Gutenberg spent the rest of his life on a pension. The machine that eventually put a book within reach of an ordinary person made money for almost everyone who touched it afterwards. It never made any for him. Printing itself was not new. China had been printing from carved wooden blocks for 700 years by then. A whole page, cut in reverse into a single block of wood, inked, and pressed onto paper. The oldest dated printed book in the world is a Chinese scroll from 868. Movable type was not new either. Around 1040, an artisan named by Sheng cut individual characters into clay, hardened them in a fire, and set them in an iron frame on a bed of warmed resin. We know this because a scholar named Sheng wrote it down in a book of essays about 50 years later. Bai Sheng held no office and left no workshop. Without that one entry, his name would simply be gone. Korea went further. Printers under the Goryeo dynasty cast their type in bronze, and in 1377, a temple outside Qingju used it to print a text called the Jikshi. That book still exists. It sits in a library in Paris. It was printed 78 years before Gutenberg's Bible. So why is the story usually told the other way round? Not because anyone in Europe was cleverer. Because of the alphabet. Printing Chinese or Korean meant casting and sorting thousands of distinct characters before a single page could be set. A European printer needed a few dozen letters, used over and over. Movable type fits an alphabet the way a key fits a lock. That is an accident of writing, not a measure of anybody's ingenuity. There was a second thing Europe needed, and it had arrived by the same long road. Paper was Chinese. It reached the Islamic world in the 8th century, and within 100 years mills were running in Baghdad, in Damascus, in Cairo, and in Fez. The first paper mill on European soil was in Muslim Spain, at Zadova, around 1150. That matters more than it sounds. Printing onto animal skin does not scale. A single vellum copy of Gutenberg's Bible consumed the hides of well over 100 calves. Paper is what makes a print run worth setting up at all. Without the mills, a press is a machine with nothing to print on. What Gutenberg actually invented was smaller than a press and harder. It was a hand mould. A small adjustable box, held closed in two halves, that let one worker cast letter after letter in metal, every single one exactly the same height and exactly the same depth, hour after hour, for years. That is the whole problem of printing, solved. Type has to be identical. A letter sitting a fraction high prints as a black smear and ruins the page. A fraction low and it prints nothing at all. Gutenberg was trained as a goldsmith, so he understood alloys. He mixed lead with tin and antimony, soft enough to cast a sharp edge, hard enough to survive being struck 1,000 times. He had to invent the ink as well. Water-based ink beads up and slides off metal. So he took the painter's answer instead, pigment ground into boiled oil, thick as varnish. Analyzed today, the ink on his Bible turns out to be unusually heavy in copper and lead. It has not faded in 5.5 centuries. The press itself he borrowed. Wine makers had one. Paper makers had one. A wooden screw, a flat plate, a bed underneath, and when you turn the bar, the plate comes straight down without tilting. All he had to do was make it gentle enough to kiss the paper rather than crush it. None of this was cheap. In 1450, he borrowed 800 guilders from a Mainz financier named Johann Fust at 6%, with the equipment itself pledged as security. 2 years later, Fust put in 800 more, this time as a partner in what the documents call the work of the books. The work of the books was the Bible. Around 180 copies, 1,200 pages each, in 2 volumes. Setting it took close to 300 different pieces of type. Not just the alphabet, but ligatures and shortened forms, so that every single line could be squeezed or stretched to end exactly flush with the one above it. It worked. In the spring of 1455, a visiting churchman wrote to a cardinal that he had seen finished sheets of it at Frankfurt, that the lettering was so clean a man could read it without glasses, and that he had tried to buy a copy and been told every one was already spoken for. That same year, Fust sued him. The record survives, a notary's document drawn up in Mainz that November in the refectory of a monastery. Fust wanted 2,026 guilders. the loans plus the interest on the interest. Gutenberg's position was that the money had been an investment in a joint venture, not a debt with a clock running on it. The court did not agree. Fust took the collateral, and the collateral was the workshop. He took Gutenberg's foreman too. Peter Schoeffer had been cutting type in that workshop for years. He went to work for Fust and later married Fust's daughter. 2 years after the trial, the firm of Fust and Schoeffer printed the Mainz Psalter in 3 colors, with a line at the end naming the printers and the date. It is the first printed book that signs itself. Gutenberg's name is not on it. He did not starve. In 1465, the Archbishop of Mainz took him into his court, which came with grain, with wine, and with exemption from tax. He died 3 years later and was buried in a Franciscan church that was demolished long ago. Nobody knows where he is. The machine, meanwhile, got out. Printers trained in Mainz did not stay in Mainz. Within 40 years, there were presses in something like 270 European towns, and between them, they had produced somewhere near 20 million books, on a continent that held perhaps 60 million people. A manuscript Bible was a year of a scribe's life. A printed one was days of press time. That is the change everyone remembers, and it is entirely real. A scholar who had once saved for years to own a single book could own a shelf of them. Here is the part that usually gets left out. A press does not know what it is printing. In 1517, a German monk published 95 complaints against the church, and printers had them across the country inside a fortnight. That is the story we like to tell. But 30 years before that, the same machines had made a bestseller of a manual for identifying and prosecuting witches. It was reprinted for 200 years, and it sat on the desks of the men who ran the trials. Printing did not make Europe wiser. It made Europe faster. Every idea already in the room, the true ones and the false ones and the murderous ones alike, simply got louder and arrived sooner. We like our inventions to have inventors, because it makes the story short enough to tell. But the press at Mainz stood on Chinese paper, on Chinese and Korean movable type, on a winemaker's screw, and on a goldsmith's feel for metal. Gutenberg's own contribution was the smallest object in the room, a little adjustable mold that made every letter exactly the same. He built the machine that made copying cheap, and he kept nothing. His Bible carries no printer's name at all. No signature, no date, no claim of any kind on the last page. We call it the Gutenberg Bible anyway. It is the only thing he was ever given, and he was dead before anybody gave it to him.